Good morning. I'd like to begin today's meeting by acknowledging the traditional custodians on the land on which we are gathered and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Welcome to the City Governance Committee meeting of the 6th of February 2024. I declare this meeting open at 11:05 a.m. I'd like to advise attendees in the room that this meeting is being webcast and audio recorded. And we do have a leave of absence today. Okay, yep, it's up on the board. So are we going to move for that? Yep, Councillor Hall's moved the motion. Do I need a seconder? Yeah, and a seconder, Councillor Wilcox. Those all in favour, raise your hand. Deputy Mayor Kerensky, how do you vote? Yep, that's been carried unanimously. I now refer to declarations of conflicts of interest. Do any councillors wish to declare a conflict of interest against any reports on today's agenda? There being none, I'll now refer to the reports on today's agenda. So the first one is item 5.1, Customer Centricity Plan. Oh, sorry. Does anyone have any general business for the Director of People and Engagement? There being none, you may leave, Director. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I will stay for some of the reports.
Yep.
That's
sorry.
okay.
Yep. Okay. So, refer back to item 5.1, Customer Centricity Plan. Mr. Leo Clayton, I'll allow you to speak to the report, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, councillors. I'm here to speak today on the Customer Centricity Plan, which is Council's aim to deliver improved customer centricity across Council. The plan that you'll see attached to the report outlines our organisational step change approach to delivering a consistent and exceptional experience that puts our customers at the centre of what we do. This plan will align with our customer charter and our customer experience strategy, and it is a customer-centric model that focuses on people, processes and systems to simplify processes, improve access and make it easier for our customers to do business while providing efficiencies for our staff. While our council has a strong record, we know we can do better in this area, and our city is growing and our customers' needs and our expectations are changing. Therefore, we're committed to improving our systems and processes to deliver a better customer outcome. Also, this plan formalises our operational approach to improving customer centricity. The Customer Service and Information Branch has been working in the background up until this point to support an improved customer experience and prepare ourselves for where we're at with the plan. So just to share some examples of the things that have been happening in this space up until now, we've introduced callback option for our contact centre for customers. The Logan Water IVR was introduced to improve responsiveness to water faults and disruptions. We've undertaken customer service training for Weybridge officers, improved our process for change of address and the NAR register. We've also implemented customer improvements for RCM, upgraded our online service portal and recently introduced new processes to support people who are using their digital driver's licences when interacting with Council. The plan aims to enhance our satisfaction amongst the community and improve overall sentiment by community, while supporting a process and system improvement and making it easier and more efficient for staff to support customer service delivery. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, are there any questions, councillors? So Councillor Lane, any more? Okay, Councillor Lane.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair, through you. So one of the things in reading this report, I noted that there was talk about, more online accessibility for residents. And when we think of customer centricity plans by businesses, that means they're cutting services and you're not going to be able to speak to someone. That's not the case in this plan, is it? Someone will still be able to call Council, get onto the call centre and actually be able to have their issue serviced, particularly if they're not on the internet or don't want to be on the internet.
Through the Chair, that's absolutely correct. This plan is not about removal of the contact centre or the phone line. It's about improving access and giving customers more choice. We know that our customers have a preference to use the phones, but we also know that there's a changing use by the community and a demand for more and improved online services. So this plan really is looking at ways to improving that online experience, and that will happen through some of the work that's been done through digital transformation, also through the work we've recently done to upgrade our online services. We know that from our analysis of usage that there is a need for people to use, or a want by people to use the online services, but it doesn't quite translate from the people who visit the online services page to the requests that are actioned. So we know there's improvement there, but this plan is to increase and make the online services more appealing and more easy to use by our community, to free up the number of calls that are coming through that we know there are members of the community who could be doing that online if the tool was better. And that will free up time to be able to help customers over the phone who need it.
Thanks very much. And I want to say thank you to yourself and the Director for coming and going through my concerns. Once this report came out, I read it and I raised concerns. You came and you answered all of my questions. You have a specific focus on those people who are vulnerable, but also those people who want to get on and literally just press a button and say, my bin hasn't been picked up. Here's the address, away you go, and that's it. And I really think residents will appreciate what you're trying to achieve here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Next councillor with the question, Councillor Bradley.
Thank you, through the chair. Not really specific to this report, but I want to give you feedback from constituents who have told me when they ring up, the staff already know who they are. They don't even have to say their name, where they're from, or anything like that. It comes up automatically. So I just want to pass that on. Sincere thanks for that. And it wasn't just one person who said it, there were a number of people.
Through the chair, thanks for that feedback. It's really good for the team to know that the community appreciates the service they're receiving. Thank you.
Are there any more questions, councillors? No one online? Yep. There being none, the motion's up on the board. Oh, sorry. Okay, so Councillor Lane would like to move the motion. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bannon. Those in favour, raise your hand. That's been carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, now referring to item 5.2, the policy repeal code of conduct for... Oh, sorry. Does anyone have any general business for the customer service and information manager? There being none, thank you for coming here today. Okay, I now refer to item 5.2, policy repeal code of conduct for staff. It's a report of the Director, and Mr. Jeff Watson will be speaking to the report. Thank you. Mr. Watson, you may speak to the report.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, Mayor and councillors. Council reviews its code of conduct for staff every 2 years and updates according to legislative requirements. The CEO has responsibility for adoption in line with the requirements of the Public Sector Act. While the CEO is ultimately responsible for adoption of the code of conduct, in practice this is only done with the support of ELT and after consultation with all staff and unions. The Code of Conduct will remain a publicly available document. Council has also taken the opportunity to review the policy titled Code of Conduct for Staff, which is found to be redundant. This is because Council maintains a separate Code of Conduct, which is comprehensive, contemporary and operational in nature. I'm happy to take any questions before moving through the proposed recommendations.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Watson. I have a question from Councillor Heremyah. Are there any more questions from councillors? No, not at this stage. Thank you, Councillor Heremyah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Council officer stated that the Code of Conduct policy is redundant. Can you please describe why the Code of Conduct policy is redundant?
So I'm happy to answer is with regards to updates to all of our, sorry for the noise, the policies. This is an operational policy that applies at an operational nature to council staff. external policies for the benefit of the community. So we've received advice from governance around the change from a policy to an operational policy under our new framework.
Thank you. And what would be the impact of changing it from a strategic policy approved by councillors to an operational policy approved by the CEO?
The requirement to approve the code of conduct for staff has always remained the responsibility of the CEO under the Act. So the change would be that really the CEO maintains that responsibility.
Which act is that?
Public Services Act, Public Sector Act, sorry.
The Public Sector Ethics Act of 1994? So the statement that it's always been that is incorrect, because when that act was a bill and it was introduced in the Parliament, in the explanatory notes, it states that the councillors approve the code of conduct for staff. And I quote, a code of conduct is to be approved by a responsible authority. That was once the council. It was changed to be the CEO as the responsible authority. So it hasn't always been that way, and it's changed. Under legislation, the CEO has the power to change and approve a code of conduct, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we shouldn't go above and beyond. The Australian Institute of Company Directors sets out in 2020 that code of conducts for staff should be approved by the board. And as a council cohort, we are the equivalent of a board. We have many pieces of legislation that give an individual or a role a power. But as a councillor cohort, we've decided to introduce policies to manage and govern that power. For example, CBF. In legislation, many experts say that CBF, that councillors can give out discretionary, has to follow a community grants policy. We set that policy. So we could have made it that a councillor can go and hand out CBF with cash. But we choose not to do that. We choose to have a policy in place that has good checks and balances and encourages good corporate governance because we are a good government. By repealing this code of conduct policy, it results in the CEO and the role of the CEO having the power to approve and change the code of conduct without any oversight or notification to the board. That seems to be in direct contravention of advice from the Australian Institute of Company Directors. Just because a power is given to you doesn't mean that we shouldn't govern it. I think that a code of conduct policy is advantageous, and it should be that any code of conduct change that the CEO makes should be required to have a notification provided to the councillors. So we understand that the code of conduct's been changed and we have that check and balance. That's the role of a board, that's the role of councillors, and I'm concerned that we're proposing to completely repeal the code of conduct policy instead of changing it to be better. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Through the chair, I wonder whether our governance manager would like to comment, or we just note the comments that are provided by the councillor.
Mr. Chair, it wasn't a question, it was just my opinion.
Anyway, no one is wanting to respond, I guess, so that's fine. So there are no more questions. There is, okay, quite a few now. Sorry, so Councillor Russell, Councillor Bradley and the Mayor. Okay, Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could I please just inquire why now? Why is now a relevant time? Because it seems like we've been in the building for 4 years and this has never come up as a relevant issue. And I'm just wondering now we're sort of in a bit of a tenuous position where making significant decisions as a council is, I'll be honest, I'm not quite sure. I don't quite understand exactly what types of decisions we can and can't make while we're in caretaker mode. But this seems like a big one. So yeah, my question is why now and why not earlier, or why can't it wait until later?
Director, would you like to comment in respect to the timing? It is, as far as the Code of Conduct as a document, we have a 2-year cycle of updating that, and that 2-year cycle has finished now. That's why we had advice that we should revise the policy at the same time that we're revising the Code of Conduct. In terms of the change of what constitutes an operational policy versus a non-operational policy, I think there are better people in the room to give a more accurate response than myself.
Morning, councillors. Through the chair. The director is correct. So I suppose the catalyst for revisiting this particular policy is the scheduled review of the Code of Conduct for staff, which is underway at the moment. So it's quite a comprehensive review of the Code of Conduct. So in no way, shape or form does this report suggest that the Code of Conduct would be repealed. That's continually enhanced based on input from across the organisation, and particularly in P&C in terms of how the old Code of Conduct or the existing Code of Conduct has served us in terms of making changes to it. The perspective in relation to the policy is a corporate governance initiative in relation to a review of all of the council policies over time to determine which of those policies actually need to come to council for approval and which of those policies can be adopted by council staff rather than having to come on an agenda to a council for you to consider and for you to adopt. The view in the corporate governance team is that this particular policy it isn't required to come to council for a decision. Now, notwithstanding that, it is your determination as to whether it does or doesn't. However, there is the consideration that there is a framework in place already that obliges the CEO to adopt a code of conduct for staff, and all of the staff within the organisation, including the CEO, must follow that council code of conduct. If there are issues in relation to council staff's conduct that's observed by the councillors, then there are processes in place for managing those particular issues when they arise, and that in those instances that behaviour is I suppose managed against the code of conduct that is adopted by the CEO. Having said that, as I think the manager alluded to, decisions in relation to the adoption of the code of conduct are made by the executive leadership team. So we all sit down and we have an opportunity to workshop the code of conduct. We all have an opportunity to identify where we think it can be improved. And then once it's completed through the various iterations of the process, it's adopted by the executive leadership team. So there are lots of checks and balances in place to ensure the code of conduct is the best it can be. And there's lots of processes in place to ensure that staff operate as per or within the bounds of the council code of conduct.
Councillor Russell, further questions?
Thank you. Can I just respond? Is it, like, this is a question now. Is it? I'm just thinking, given that that election cycles are 4 years, and we found ourselves right before an election with this one coming up, does that mean that this occurs, you know, every second 2-year cycle, that all of these types of questions are coming up just before an election? Is it possible, if that is the case, then could that be changed so that we're not in that situation again? But yeah, I'm imagining if this is this happens every 2 years, that this must happen every election.
It is the case that both the code of conduct is reviewed periodically and also policies are reviewed periodically. I think in this case the timing is probably not great from councillors' perspective. It wouldn't always potentially, the review of the council code of conduct wouldn't necessarily align with the review of the policy. So if the decision today was endorsed by council, there wouldn't be a policy that would need to come back to council periodically for approval. The policy, operational policy, would be adopted by council staff. So if it's approved today, this would be kind of like the last time you see a report of this nature. Having said that, there are other checks and balances to ensure a code of conduct is actually put in place and staff are held accountable against that code of conduct.
So that answers your question, does it, Councillor Russell? Okay, Councillor Bradley was next on the list, then Mayor Power.
Thank you, through the chair. I do feel a bit uncomfortable, probably with Councillor Hieronymi on this one, in relation to this being, you know, we don't have oversight over this anymore. During administration, policies were changed, how they were normally presented to councillors, and now I feel that this is very similar in a way, and the issues I have had with staff, I don't feel they've been dealt with appropriately, in my opinion. And I do have concern if it's just pushed away from our oversight. So I will not be voting for this today based on that.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Mayor Power.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I don't want to curb Councillor Hieronymi's enthusiasm, and I enjoy some of his debate. However, I will add to this that I've been here for 27 years. I've never seen any councillors actually address the Code of Conduct for officers, because clearly they know the boundary between what is operational and what is not. Once we start interfering in operational matters, then I think things will deteriorate. I think this is the onus of the CEO, and he has paid a lot of money to oversee the staff. And overseeing the staff is obviously involving this policy. I'm very, very comfortable with the CEO taking full control over the staff, because clearly that's what I've seen happen in 27 years. Once we start trying to control this, I think we're going to lose the plot. So I'll leave it at that, but clearly not comfortable with the conversation that's already taken place. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Wilcox.
Thank you, through the chair. Just when the conversation was starting, Councillor Hieronymi made a statement, but the director did ask that the manager respond to it. I'm wondering if the manager would like to respond to anything so far, because I can see she might want to. I would like to hear if she has anything to add.
Through the chair, councillors, during induction we will give you more information around the new policy as we refer to it, which is the corporate governance documents policy that's been adopted at an operational level by ELT. Essentially, what that is trying to achieve is that very clear distinction of what were management directives, and we're calling those operational policies, and what are still council policies. And we have been given the approval by ELT to, over the 24-25 financial year, conduct an organisational wide review of policies. At the moment, we have over 150 or 200 policies which are approved by this council, and then about the same number again of management directives. So we're trying to rationalise them. When we look at them, we do a review in terms of what does this policy add. So if we look at the policy as it was, it did nothing more than state what the statute says, and that is that there is a code of conduct. Council actually didn't approve the code of conduct or the content of it. All they did was approve the policy. And so that's the framework in which I provided the advice that the policy was redundant, because council hasn't historically and doesn't have the obligation to approve the code of conduct that exists under the Public Sector Ethics Act as a statutory obligation of the CEO. Now, I have no concerns at all if council wanted to pass a resolution that said once the CEO has done that he advise councillors, but I don't believe that it would be appropriate for this body to approve the code of conduct, because that statutory obligation sits with the CEO. Now, Cherie may be able to offer legal advice on that point, but I don't think I think it's a statutory obligation that sits with the CEO.
I haven't finished. I've still got more.
Okay, keep
Sorry.
going. Yeah.
Thank you so much for adding that in. Just a quick question. So I've just looked online. When you go to conditions of employment, there is a code of conduct guide under that. So is that what staff are now provided?
So probably better a question for Jeff, but all staff are bound by the code of conduct. So when they're all employed, and that includes the CEO, my understanding, and I have not seen the CEO's employment contract, but my understanding is that would call upon and bind each of the staff to the code of conduct. So one of the reasons for the change in name from management directives to policies was that it's important that staff be bound by all policies, whether they be external facing or internal. So the use of the policies word is one reason to do that, so that it's binding on all staff. So the code of conduct takes effect as an operational policy and therefore binding on all staff.
Thank you so much.
Okay, Councillor Heremiah, you were putting your hand up before. Do you want to be the last to speak, or do you just want to speak this one time and that's it?
I'm
Yeah.
happy.
Oh, yeah.
I'm happy just to speak, just to clarify a few things. So
But then you don't want to be at the end either, or
that's correct.
okay.
To
Yeah.
clarify a few things, no one was ever debating whether or not the CEO should have the power to approve the code of conduct or whether councillors should have the power to approve the code of conduct. We don't even have that power to make that decision. Parliament passed a law that said the CEO has the power to approve and change the code of conduct. So that was never in discussion, to clarify that, because it's a protected right of the CEO to do it. And even if council approved our own code of conduct, it would have no weight because the CEO holds that power given to him or them by the Parliament. So that was never debated. I never advocated for that, to make it clear and set the record straight. What I did advocate for is transparency and going above and beyond the legislation. Just because the role of the CEO has that power doesn't mean that we can't do more and make it better. I proposed an idea of still keeping our policy that we have, but requiring a notification when the CEO does change the code of conduct to let us know that that's happened. That was the proposal. There's nothing against transparency. There's nothing concerning about transparency. And we should be encouraging transparency. I think it's a concerning precedent to set that the organisation can set their own code of conduct and not even notify the board that they report to. I think at the very least the policy should include a requirement for a notification to let us know that the role of the CEO has exercised the power to change the code of conduct that they are subject to. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so Mr. CEO, are you happy to have that in a resolution that you just reported to us, or?
I suppose, thank you for the clarification, because that's important to have that clear separation between strategy and operational activities. And to give the council comfort, there's no incentive for a CEO to, have and adopt and employ a code of conduct which diminishes the requirements of good conduct in the organisation. Because every day we are looking for ways to ensure good conduct, and tight codes of conduct are those things which help us do that enforcement. The show cause letters, the areas for improvement are based on the code of conduct. So we're always looking for a way to improve the code of conduct. So to give the council some confidence, it's in everyone's, including our interest, to make sure it's a tight, well-functioning code of conduct. And we think that the evolution of this document is heading once again in that direction. The distribution of this document is public, as a public document. So it's a document which everyone can see. So it's published. So there's no issues with hiding it. Every induction that I do in induction to a room full of new starters every month, and I stand up in front of that group of staff and hold up that code of conduct document and wave it at them and say, this thing matters, we're enforcing it. So the code of conduct does get a lot of airtime in the organisation, and I have no issue with sharing, which I would happy to do with or without a resolution every time that there's an update to the document. So you don't need to put it in a resolution. I'm happy to do it as a matter of course through my normal monthly communication that we've updated the code of conduct. Here's the website link where it's on the website, so that sort of thing. Don't need a resolution, but if you would feel better with one, then you can do that too.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. So, are there any nodding of heads for people who'd like to see it in the resolution too, or is everyone happy to see
Point
it?
of order, I think before we start talking about putting a resolution in, we should at least test this first across the floor, and if it fails, then you look at doing a resolution.
So I have on the list Councillor Bannon, Councillor Raven, Councillor Bradley. Do all three of you wish to still speak, or?
No, I'm good. The Mayor said everything I was going to say.
Okay, so Councillor Raven, you still wish to speak? Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for indulgence. I agree with Councillor Haramaya's position. But I also agree with what the CEO has just said, that you must have separation of powers, but councillors are held accountable for the behaviour of staff. That is what the community does. So if there's an issue, and our staff are very good staff. The code of conduct is not for the very good staff. The code of conduct is for the very small number of staff that either by accident or on purpose breach the code of conduct. But when that happens, they don't come to you saying, I will fire you if you don't fix this problem. They come to us and say that, which is why it's really important that we know what's in that code of conduct, so that A, we can defend you if it is, like, if the behaviour is in line with it, and B, we know where the line is, so we can say, actually, you're right, that's a problem, and I'm going to take that to the CEO and have it investigated. That's why it's really important that we can see that code of conduct, that we're familiar with it, because the organisation is very familiar with our code of conduct, because the organisation has an obligation that if we may have breached our code of conduct, that they must report us, right? So that level of awareness is healthy, and it's healthy for both sides to have it, because that way, when we do get difficult questions asked by our community because they're unhappy with something that's happened, we can understand whether or not that's a justified request, and we can understand who to take it to and how to best report it. So I would feel more comfortable, like, lots of things in this place get say they'll be done, but when there's a council resolution, they must be done. That is the authority that we have. That is the authority that we implement. So I'd be more comfortable with it in a resolution than not. I have complete faith in this CEO and his ability to provide a report, but I've seen other CEOs that have not been as consistent, and I would rather have it as a council recommendation that sits there saying that when a change is made to the staff code of conduct, the councillors are made aware either through a briefing note or an update, so that we have line of sight of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Raven. Councillor Bradley.
Let it be recorded that I agree with Councillor Raven. But that wasn't why I put my hand up initially. When Ms White, wherever she is, referred to having it in the resolution, you basically, from my understanding, reiterated what Councillor Hiromaya said, that it can be done. Is that correct?
Through the chair, as Councillor Raven and Councillor Haramaya have talked to, a method of having that transparency, even though it is already an ELT decision that the code of conduct we published externally on Council's external website and available 24/7, there is the option for Council, from a belts and braces point of view, to be able to pass a resolution that asks that the CEO provide any updated code of conduct as and when it happens. Okay. There's no issue with that approach.
So, with the recommendation, which is on page 31, if that was to be amended, how would you suggest amending that?
I would recommend that those two recommendations remain, but that there be a third recommendation that simply asks that council be advised in a timely manner of any updates to the employee code of conduct, something along those lines.
Okay, thank you. Is that it all, Councillor Bradley?
I'm curious if the other two councillors who are supporting that would be interested.
The thing is that we'll test the original motion, and the alternative will be along the lines of what Ms White was saying. So, are there any more questions at all? No, there being none. Councillor Bannon's moved the original motion. Is there a seconder for the original motion? Councillor Power, the Mayor, as second. So, those in favour of the original motion, raise your hands. Okay, that. What do we got? 5, 2, 4, 6. Yeah, I'm against, so I don't abstain, I'm sorry. So we'll have to go around the room and record that correctly. So Councillor Power, how do you vote?
For.
Councillor Bradley?
Against.
Councillor Lane?
For.
Councillor Russell?
Against.
Councillor Raven?
Against.
Councillor Hall?
For.
Councillor Jeremiah?
Against.
Councillor Bannon?
For.
Councillor Stemp?
Against.
Councillor Wilcox?
For.
And Councillor Kerensky, you're for, are you?
For.
And I'm against. Yeah, I'll vote consistently against, so. Councillor Jeremiah?
Thank you, Mr Chair. Could we please put a motion up to defer this to a future committee?
Well, the thing is that the next motion can be one that Ms White was saying about. Would you be happy to have that, or do you want it to be deferred, and
Yeah,
for what
I would
reason?
like to move a motion to defer this to a future city governance committee.
So one post-election.
That's correct.
I hope you're very careful with the wording. I'd hate to see an ultra vires resolution.
The thing is, the plan was that we're going to do that third point for the resolution. So if this didn't get up, we need to do that, I guess, and we can do what you've suggested as well. Okay, so that motion failed, so we'll do the alternate one with that third point. We're just working on the wording now. Yes, you may.
Thanks very much. My question is to the Director. Madam Director, when you brought this forward, it was your intention to actually have this as a working document that Council can use as part of its operational processes, of which we are not part of that process, but we are kept appraised of any staff complaints and referrals and things like that. Is there anything in that original motion that was out of whack in any way, shape or form? And why are we considering a secondary motion that the org didn't feel was beneficial to put up in the first place? I'm at a loss as to how to go with this.
To be honest, I think my expectation and the expectation of the team was that the council would always have visibility when there was a change to the code of conduct, most likely via the CEO providing that update, because there's nothing to hide where I'm very happy to share it. It's a public document and we want you to know whenever we're making any enhancements. So I guess it was an explicit assumption that the document was there to be shared. So it wasn't a deliberate omission, and it wasn't considered because it was a working expectation.
Thanks very much. My second question is to the City Solicitor. Are you comfortable with the wording of this next recommendation in relation to once it's up? Could you please express that?
It is up.
Good morning, Mr Chair. Councillor, I'm happy with that. I think there's no problem at all with the CEO communicating and updating council on amendments to the Code of Conduct. I assume then that the intent is just for the CEO to advise informally rather than a report to council. Is that the intent? Through you, Mr Chair, I imagine that the reference to a timely manner is simply if an amendment is made, that a report be brought back to the next committee.
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Yeah, I'm looking at the wording there and I understand where our city solicitor is coming from, but I'm looking at how it's perceived in the public's view, and when I read that, it indicates to me that the councillors are prepared to interfere in the process of Code of Conduct. Why otherwise would they want to be up to date? The only indication to me is they're not happy with the Code of Conduct and they want to protest if there's something that comes up that the CEO has made them feel uncomfortable with, which I think is out of play. I think the wording there, I will not be supporting it because I think it sends two messages, and someone who on the outside interprets that looks like that the council are intending to get involved in operational matters.
Thank you for your comment, Mr Mayor. So, are any more comments particularly necessary? Is everyone happy with that? Yep. Okay, we'll go to the vote then. So, can I have a mover for the above motion? Councillor Raven has moved. Have I got a seconder? Councillor Bradley. Those in favour, raise your hand. And Councillor Koransky, you are not voting for, I'm guessing. So we'll have to go around the room and take the vote.
Against, Mr Chair.
Yeah, no worries. So Councillor Power.
Against.
Councillor Bradley.
For.
Councillor Lane.
Against.
Councillor Russell.
Against.
Councillor Raven.
For.
Councillor Hall.
I'm going to abstain from this one, actually, guys.
Sorry, point of order. Did Councillor Hall actually just have his hand up and he's switched?
I've just decided to change my mind. Councillor Wilcox, I'm allowed to do that.
Can we do that though once the votes actually started to be taken? I'm not sure.
Okay, you can, it seems. Councillor Jeremiah.
For.
Councillor Bannon.
Against.
Councillor Stamp.
Abstaining.
Councillor Wilcox.
Or
I'm for. Okay, councillors, thank you. That has been lost. So the third proposed motion is to defer till post-election. So the first committee after the election, or?
Thank you, Mr Chair. I'm just proposing to move a motion that says that this report is deferred to a future City Governance Committee. Now, that future City Governance Committee would be up to the author of the report when they choose to raise it and ELT. I think that we just need to keep on moving, and I don't think there's an urgency to vote on motions that we're writing as we go. We can have the same discussion next committee, and the council officer recommendation might get up, it might not, but right now this isn't very productive, so we should just defer it and move on.
Thank you for that. They're working on the wording now. Hold tight for a sec. The wording is now up on the board. Is anyone willing to move this motion? Councillor Heremias moved. Have I got a seconder? Councillor Hall. Okay, by show of hands, those in favour, raise your hand. Okay, we need to go around the room and get the numbers. Councillor Power.
I'm against because I want it now. Thank you.
Councillor Bradley.
For.
Councillor Lane.
Same reason as the mayor against.
Councillor Russell.
For.
Councillor Raven.
For.
Councillor Hall.
For. For.
Yeah. Councillor Bannon.
Against.
Councillor Stamp.
For.
Councillor Wilcox.
Against.
Councillor Karansky.
I agree with the mayor. Against.
And I was for. Thank you, councillors. That carried 7-5. We'll move on to the next item. Okay, thank you to the managers and the director. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. Does anyone have any general business for the corp? For the? No, yeah, he's gone. The sheet's under there. That's all right. The director. So, did anyone have any general business for the people and culture manager? Sorry, I did miss that. There being none, we'll continue. So, item 5.3 is titled Proposed Lease of Council Land in Logan Lee. And I do note that this is a confidential report and the reasons are up on the board. So, under section 254J, subsection 3G, negotiations relating to a commercial matter involving the local government for which a public discussion would be likely to prejudice the interests of the local government. Does anyone wish to go into confidential for this report? No. So, Mr. Manager, you'll just take the report as read pretty much? You don't want to speak to it at all, do you? Or, okay. So, the resolution is up on the board. Everyone's happy to read that. Okay, so Councillor Hall has moved it. Councillor Raven has seconded. I'll put it to the vote now by show of hands. Those in favour, raise your hand, please. Yeah, and Councillor Karansky's voted yes, so that's been carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Does anyone have any general business for the corporate property manager? There being none, thank you, Mr. Watson. Oh, Mr. McGrath, sorry. Yeah, wrong one. I've got too many sheets here. So, where are we? So, item 5.4, monthly financial report or financial performance report, December 2023. A report of the Director of Org Services, Mr. Robert Strachan, and Finance Manager, Miss Caroline Bugg, will speak to the report, I'm guessing. So, thank you, Miss Bugg.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, councillors. Item 5.4 is the monthly financial performance report for the period ending 31 December 2023. It's important to note that this report does not yet account for any of the costs associated with the severe weather event that occurred late in December. It is expected that those costs will come through in later monthly reports. This report is a quarterly financial report and provides greater detail on some of the programs, for example, the local infrastructure program, and also a summary of the financial indicators and ratios. No new risks were identified in December. However, as I mentioned, the cost for the weather event will reflect in later financial reports. This report has continued the same trends that have emerged over the recent financial reports that have been presented previously. The operating result reflects a surplus of $28 million. This result is above year-to-date budget by $16 million. The result is predominantly being driven by revenue greater than year-to-date budget, I've noted the items driving that variance previously, but noting again, water charges are higher than budget, offset by bulk water costs. Private works revenue, again higher than budget, is also offset by expenses related to those works. The DA fees continue to hold and tracking above budget, and also the grants that have been previously received in the financial year. Operating expenses are also running marginally above budget, with a variance to budget of just 1%. As previously reported, there are two major items from the revenue offset in these expenses, being bulk water and the private works. I'd just like to bring your attention to a couple of the key indicators. You'll note that the growth in rateable properties for the quarter saw an additional 863 assessments. That's a total of 1,669 additional properties in the first half of the financial year. This is tracking well against the annual growth projections. Also noting the outstanding rates and charges at the end of December were 7.53% outstanding, and that's against a level of previous year of 7.32. So this is a very good result given the annual growth in assessments. There's also the capital report, which is indicating that we're running slightly above year-to-date budget, and there are commentary for individual projects related to the key projects in the report. The local infrastructure program summary is also provided in this quarterly update. All the detailed information, though, is available through the recently developed reporting portal. Also noting that no further LIP projects will be presented for approval through the caretaker period as per those guidelines. The projects approved in January are not yet considered in the report presented today. Just in relation to rates and charges, as I know it is an area of interest, mentioning that the outstanding amounts or accounts, the percentage outstanding has hasn't moved significantly in the last 12 months, which I think is a really good sign for the community. Recoveries have also confirmed that we have received only a few calls in relation to properties impacted by the storms, and generally speaking, those customers set up longer repayment schedules than just the 3-month option that was developed specifically to support those property owners. I am happy to answer any specific questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Bugg. I have questions from Councillor Bradley and Councillor Karansky. Is your hand up deliberately, or did you forget to put it down? Staying up.
My apologies, Mr. Chair. I'm taking it down now.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Councillor Bradley.
Thank you through the chair. As always, I'm keeping an eye on those rates arrears, but that wasn't why I put my hand up. The email that you sent out with the LIP and how that can't be allocated. So I was a bit surprised to see that there was some money there. That can obviously be utilised after the election.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions, councillors? There being none, the motion's up on the board. Do I have a mover? Councillor Bradley's moved. Councillor Stamp second. Those in favour, raise your hand. That's been carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Okay, does anyone have any general business for the finance manager? There being none, thank you, Caroline. Okay, next item on the agenda is item 5.5, the Q2 2023-2024 operational plan. It's a report of the CEO and Enterprise Portfolio Management Office Manager, Ms. Kay Sullivan, will be speaking to the report. You may proceed, Ms. Sullivan.
Good afternoon, councillors. Item 5.5 is our Q2 operational plan. I will take the report as read, but just highlight the following points. There are 34 projects that we monitor in our operational plan. 3 of those have been complete, 27 are on track, and 2 are in monitor. When I have a look at the reasons for the 2 projects being in monitor, the first one, the solar panel recycling services, we're a little bit at the whim of market conditions there, which is pushing our schedule behind.
and the Community Champions project, I think it's fair to say we've got some usual challenges there as we look to manage and set up the system and structures to make sure that we've got volunteers on hand. So I'm not overly concerned with those two projects being on monitor. The recommendations that have been put forward with regard to one project not complete, so we're changing the scope of the reconciliation action plan, and one of the projects not proceeding is the Riverine Discovery Centre. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Bradley?
Thank you, through the chair. I'm quite curious about the city parking enforcement strategy. Are you able to talk to that?
Is there a particular...
There's reference to it on page 59. Or the first page of your report.
Are you specifically looking for what those deliverables were, Councillor?
Yes, please.
Am I able to send those through to you offline?
Okay. You can't talk to it? Or?
I don't have the level of detail there to be able to talk to the exact deliverables, but I can send those through offline.
Okay.
Thank you, councillors. Are there any more questions? There being none, the motion's up on the board. Can I have a mover for this, please? Councillor Bannon, Councillor Wilcox, the second. By show of hands, please raise your hands in support of this motion. That is being carried unanimously. Thank you. I now refer to item 5.6 on the agenda. Ms. Sullivan is also speaking to this report. You may proceed, Ms. Sullivan.
Thank you very much. Item 5.6 is phase 1 and 2 for our service reviews. It's with regard to ITS branch. I will take the report as read and just highlight the following points. First, I'd just like to acknowledge Rick and his team for the amount of effort that they've put in completing phase 1 and phase 2 of the service review. Some of the key highlights were 9 service activities documented, 74 business processes identified, 11 customer personas were developed and finalised, 10 customer journey maps. We identified 78 opportunities for improvement and were able to cluster those into 7 improvement clusters. What I'd like to highlight for committee is that within the EPMO we are repurposing a number of our team members. We have a significant number of opportunities being identified through the service reviews, and what we're looking to do is to make sure the organisation has the support it needs to be able to implement those improvement opportunities. So there is a roadmap being developed for each branch with timelines on how we'll implement those opportunities. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, councillors. Are there any questions at all on this item? There being none, the motion will be up on the board. Can I have a mover for this motion, please? Councillor Bannon, a seconder. Councillor Power. By show of hands, those in favour of the motion, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. That motion has been carried unanimously. So does anyone have any GB for the EPMO manager? There being none, thank you, Ms. Sullivan.
Thank you.
Okay, next item on the agenda is item 5.7. And the Director of Organisational Services, Mr. Robert Strachan, will be speaking to the report. Thank you, Robert.
Through the Chair, this is the first update on the Underwood Innovation Lab, the first shareholders report. We don't have representatives from the Underwood Innovation Lab here today, being the first update. This report is tabled in fulfilment of their obligations under the Constitution, their Constitution, to report both quarterly and 6 monthly to Council. So they only have been operational for a relatively short period of time. And there's not a lot of information there for them to report on. I will note in the report it does articulate in relation to the next reporting period, which will be the period that ends 31 March. They will be providing their normal quarterly update, along with an update on their draft strategic plan and their business plan, along with their budget for 2024-25. So there'll be more detail in relation to go with the next quarterly report, and staff from Unilab, I think, as well as the board chair, will be coming to talk to the shareholders, yourself, in relation to those strategic documents and in relation to the performance of the organisation.
Thank you, Director. So I've got questions from Councillor Lane, Councillor Heremiah and the Mayor. So we'll kick off with Councillor Lane.
Thanks very much. Mr. Director, can you tell us why no one's here from Innovation Lab?
So thanks for the question, Councillor Lane. I did ask them whether they wanted to attend to address Council with this particular update. I suppose the feedback was, twofold. One was that the Constitution as currently drafted actually doesn't require them to come and talk to the report, so that's potentially an opportunity to revise the Constitution. So they hadn't. It wasn't on their radar. It wasn't in their work plan. Constitution aside, they have articulated that at the next meeting, when they bring their strategic documents, their business plan, as well as their budget for next financial year, they will come along, and it is a requirement that those documents be submitted to the shareholder for consideration.
Thanks very much. If you can just express my disappointment that they're not here today, it'd be appreciated.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Councillor Heremiah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to also express my astonishment that we don't have any experts here that can speak to this report, any representatives on behalf of the business. And I think it's disappointing that a response, or at least part of a response that we received, is that their constitution doesn't require them to be here. There's $2 million in their bank account given to them by Logan City Council. I know many businesses that if an investor gave them $2 million, they would be more than happy to meet with that investor. I had so many questions. I spent all last night with my reading glasses on, reading up about their interest rates on the bank account, about their whole financial plans. I even read that constitution because they included a huge amount of pages to really get into it. And I was really excited to learn more about innovation and ask some questions, and no one's here. So I think that's disappointing. From my reading of the documents that they have provided, and it would have been great to get a verbal submission, is that they've spent 18% of the expenditure that they plan to spend. And okay, so they plan to spend this much, they spent 18% of it. When it comes to their revenue side, they plan to make this much, and they've generated 0% of that. So they've spent 18% of their expenditure, and they've generated 0% of the revenue that they promised they would deliver during the business plan. So I hope that 0% is pushed up to maybe 5%, maybe 100%. I'm really looking forward to the next meeting where we have the representatives here, because it is an interesting business that council owns, and it would be great to be able to discuss about it in more detail. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Power.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I might start with just saying I told you so. I'm still waiting to get some news of some grant payments that they were going to get. I think we were virtually promised that this money was money in the bank and that the operation would be running in a profit. I can't believe that they didn't turn up. I can understand why they didn't turn up, because they're scared of the mayor. I predicted this. I knew there would be no money coming. We've all been taken for suckers, honestly. We have been taken for suckers. Well, we were promised, and things are not being delivered. I'm sorry, but it's not a great result.
Thank you for the comment, Councillor Power. Councillor Raven would like to speak, but please keep it short and fair.
No, I'll do my best. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wasn't going to speak, but the Mayor's comments deserve some kind of response. I agree, it'd be great to have them here. I think they should be here to answer questions. I'm disappointed that they're not. Trying to say that where's their profit after how many weeks of operations, Robert? Because they got delayed by our slow decision-making process.
6th of November, I think they started.
Cool. So we've had a month of business before, 6 weeks before Christmas, and then we've had 6 weeks after Christmas. If I'd have asked you how many election commitments you'd delivered on in the first 12 weeks of your term, Mr. Mayor, it'd also be a very low number because it takes time to do things. You can't just turn on a switch and make the magic happen. And in business, to expect a profit in 12 weeks is clearly unreasonable. So you lost the vote, accept that you lost the vote, and give them the time to actually do their jobs. But I agree with you and Councillor Jeremiah, they should have been here. I 100% agree with that, to answer questions and to explain what they've done and what their plan is. Why didn't they get that grant? All of those are good reasons to have them here, Mr. Mayor. I agree with you on that.
Councillor Hall, you would like to make a comment? You're not going to make jokes or anything like that, are you? It's a decent comment or a question.
You offend me with that.
I'll let you proceed.
Yeah, like just showing up as part of the job. But did anyone invite them?
Sorry, through the chair, I did inquire as to whether they were attending to talk to the report. So yes.
Thank you.
It was a couple of weeks ago, I think.
No doubt in our minds they should have been here, but they're not here, so we're working with what we've got.
Sorry, through the chair, I did find it on the 23rd of January.
Okay, are there any more questions about this agenda item? There being none. So that's the motion on the board. Do I have a mover? Councillor Raven, seconder. Councillor Bannon. The show of hands for those who support this motion. Okay, that has been carried, but there are some who voted different to being for the motion. So, Councillor Power, how did you vote?
I wouldn't encourage this process to go any further. I vote against it.
Councillor Bradley?
Against.
Were there any more on the floor at the moment that voted any different to for? So, Councillor Kerensky, how did you vote?
Against.
Yeah, I voted for as well, in case anyone was wondering. So thank you, councillors. That's been carried. Item 5.8. Oh, sorry. No, it is item 5.8. Yep. I don't have to ask for GB yet. So council delegations to Chief Executive Officer and Mayor February 2024 report. The Corporate Governance Manager, Ms. Anita White, will be speaking to the report. Thank you, Anita.
Thank you, and through the chair, councillors will be aware that we have in place a range of delegations from council to the CEO to operationalise relevant decisions. This paper presents a number of proposed amendments to those delegations, and I'll speak briefly to each of them. The first relates to changes that we've briefed council on that came into effect to the Local Government Act relating to councillor conduct. So we've amended the LGA delegations to give effect to those amendments. The second area is the appointment of an acting CEO. Now, at the moment, we have in place a delegation already in place to the CEO, such that if the CEO takes leave, there's a process in place where he can appoint someone to act in his behalf. What this amendment is aimed towards is if there is an unexpected circumstance where we don't have the CEO, and what we're proposing is that in those circumstances where he's not able to exercise his delegation, that we then would have the Mayor exercise that delegation. We've also, with the benefit of the City Solicitor, we've realised that the conditions that were put in place around acting in legal proceedings, which are very one-directional, aren't working in practice and aren't allowing us to respond in an appropriate way to offers of settlement or compromise or appeals in particular matters. So we're suggesting some amendments to those delegations. And the fourth area that we've proposed amendments relates to delegations under the local disaster management legislation. And that's to deal with, so at the moment, the Mayor is the chair of that and Councillor Lane is the deputy chair. And we will, as part of post-election, seek for appointments to that body. But what we need to deal with is this very small window, the window between when the election is declared and the new councillors sworn in, because there's no councillors at that time who can act if there was an emergency. So this is a sort of, this is closing a gap that's very narrow, so that we're just trying to make sure that we do have some cover in place should that eventuate. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Anita. So I have Councillor Heremiah and Councillor Power. So Councillor Heremiah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My questions and statements are pertinent to the appointment of an acting chief executive proposed changes detailed on page 2 of the report. My understanding is there's section 195 of the Local Government Act, and that gives council the power to appoint an acting CEO in certain circumstances. Now, right now, council delegates that power to the CEO. So he can appoint an acting CEO, and that's why we get those emails saying the CEO has gone on leave and he has appointed another person as the acting CEO. So council holds that power, we delegate it to the CEO. This proposed change is for council to instead delegate it to the Mayor. Is that correct?
Sorry, that's not the intent. So it's to deal with the other circumstance. So we would still have the usual, we've still got the existing delegation in place just exactly as you have described. This is in the event that something happens to the CEO that he can't exercise that delegation. So again, we're talking about this really small gap in terms of our current process. So I don't want to, talk about things that might happen, but, it would be a very unusual circumstance, but it could still happen. So, for instance, to use a West Wing example, the President fell off a bike and was unable to... No, sorry. It's really that very small example where something unforeseen happens to the CEO. They haven't had the opportunity to exercise their delegation. It allows the Mayor to make that decision to allow the organisation to continue.
And what governs who the Mayor, under this proposed change, can appoint as the acting CEO?
I believe it's limited to the other directors. Is that correct, Chris? Sorry, Chris Furlong, who's our Risk and Compliance Coordinator.
Sorry, through the chair. So as it stands at the moment, the other directors currently have the delegation to appoint a CEO. They can only appoint another director. That's a conditional on exercising that delegation. So it's delegation from council to CEO, CEO to council, CEO to employee, which is the director. In relation to this Mayor, so council will delegate to the Mayor, and then the Mayor could only appoint sort of a appropriately qualified person to act as CEO. And so I'd suggest that probably only another director would be appointed as CEO through this Mayor delegation.
Thank you. So the Mayor, under this proposal, can appoint a qualified person to act as the acting Chief Executive Officer. Is that correct?
Yes, if he was to be exercising the delegation, there'd have to be a suitably qualified person.
Thank you. And what defines what a qualified person to act as an acting chief executive officer? What defines that? And what is the definition of a qualified person?
Thanks. That ultimately is something that comes from the legislation, but it's a good point as to what that would be. But I believe that would be set out in the appointment of the CEO policy that council has adopted. So there's a policy and a guideline that talk to that, and that talks about the attributes that council. So in the event that we were actually dealing with the appointment of a councillor, it talks about the attributes that you're looking for. So it would talk about, financial experience with a large organisation. So I think that would call to that.
Thank you. The criteria for what is a qualified person who, under this proposal, the Mayor can appoint as an acting CEO is set out in section 1942 of the Local Government Act of 2009. And the test for that is someone who has the ability, experience, knowledge and skills that the local government considers appropriate having regard to the responsibilities of a chief executive officer. So there's no rule under this that it has to be another director. There's no rule under this proposed delegation that it has to be a specific person or a specific governance director or a transport director. The only test set out in the legislation under 1942 is that it has to be a very broad qualified person. My concern is that if these unique circumstances arise where the CEO has gone missing and we need to appoint an acting CEO, giving the Mayor the power, whoever the Mayor is not appropriate when we can convene a meeting and council as a cohort can decide who is most appropriate to be the acting CEO. I don't see the issue with council convening a meeting to determine that, and I think that delegating that power to the Mayor when the test for who they can appoint is so wide-ranging could present issues in the future. Because what we're doing is not voting on personalities, we're voting on a system. And I think this is setting up the system in a wrong way. We should encourage decisions of this magnitude to be made by the cohort rather than the Mayor. So that's my opinion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Next on the list is Councillor Power.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question. We're talking about not just the election period, are we? We're talking about forever and a day. Okay. I conclude with Councillor Hermeyer that I'm not happy with the wording that the Mayor can delegate. I would rather have the councillors make the decision as a whole. I remember in the last council, and what I experienced, I would not like to see repeated again. And I think that sometimes the Mayor may be, let's just say, not in the right frame of mind. He may be ostracised to the councillors. There may be problems down the track that I think one man's approach to this might be detrimental to the council. I'm quite happy with the councillors making control of this, and I think it's a wise council that would continue to do that, because it really needs to be a council decision, not the Mayor's decision. I understand that there may not be a CEO for a very small point of time, but I think the place is not going to stop overnight, and the directors would take their responsibility in their streams. So I'm quite comfortable with not having that in the place. Thank you.
So I've got a quick question before we go to Councillor Hall. Could a Mayor in effect delegate themselves to be CEO? In theory, could they do that under this proposal?
I don't believe so, because I think it would give rise to a conflict of interest arising in the exercise of that delegation. and the mayor would need to be suitably qualified in any, not to suggest that the current mayor's not, but that test would need to be passed.
Thank you. So what has been proposed, if we were to have an alternate motion, could we change it to say councillors are the ones that are delegated to make that decision, or?
Through the chair, if there was an appetite not to cover this small risk, then you simply would remove recommendation 4 such that there's no delegation and the decision remains with council. The other alternative to cover the risk is that we have that delegation to the CEO, to the mayor for a small period of time, so a time-banded ability, so that if the CEO went missing, that the mayor could appoint someone. We could put a provision that says it was simply a director, that the mayor could appoint one of the directors to be the acting CEO. Could do that, and then time band it to allow council to then make a decision. They're sort of the variations that council could consider.
So if the first motion fails, we can consider putting that up. So we had Councillor Hall with a question or a comment.
Sorry, you can take me off the list.
Okay, so are there any more questions or comments? There being none, the original motion will be up on the board very soon. I'll give everyone a few minutes, or a minute to read it quickly. Do you want me to read it out? Okay, councillors, is there anyone to move this original motion? There's not anyone to move the motion. Sorry. So that no one online even. Yep. So the motion has failed. So as an alternative. So the alternative will be to remove number 4 probably. Yes, Councillor Raven.
Thank you. Just to clarify from the manager, so if we remove number 4, then council will have the authority to appoint and we'll just have to call a special meeting or something to that effect to do it at short notice.
That's correct, and I believe that there's a 2 or 3 day notice period that we'd have to provide to call a special meeting, so there would just be a small delay where we didn't have a CEO at all.
I ask a question regarding the amount of time frame that in previous episodes where we've had some situations, we were pretty much brought in straight away. I don't know why there's a time frame of delay. Is there some legislative process there?
There is in the meeting code. I'd just have to review, and I'm happy to come back to councillors on that. I thought there was a provision in the meeting code that says that we have to provide 2 business days notice of any meeting, including a special meeting. There may be a provision which provides for an emergency such as this, and I'm happy to look at that and circle back to councillors.
Okay.
Awesome, thank you. So the amended motion is on the board. Do I have a mover for this motion? Councillor Powers moved. Councillor Raven seconded. Those in favour, please raise your hand as a show of support. That has been carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Sorry, that concludes the agenda. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Does anyone have any GB for the corporate governance manager? There being none. Thank you, Anita. That concludes the agenda for today. or not? Oh, that's what I'm about to say. Yeah. That concludes the agenda for today. Sorry. Does anyone have any GB for the Director of Organisational Services? There being none, I declare the City Governance Committee meeting on the 5th of February 2024 concluded at 12:30 p.m. Thank you.